Silicon Valley, technology, art, green, and sustainability. Welcome to another episode of Silicon Valley, Tech, Art, Green, and Sustainability. Today I'm very honored to have with me Louis Blumberg. Am I pronouncing it right?
Yes.
From the Nature Conservancy. And I used to get your magazine from a friend of mine that had the subscription. They had a lifetime. And I love the organization. I just love it. So I'm so glad that you're here to talk about climate and some other things going on. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Yeah, I'm really excited. We get to hear about your trip to Germany and some other things that's going on with climate in a minute. But before we go there, can you tell us about yourself? Are you from the Bay Area? Where are you from? What was your background? How did you get into this?
Well, I was born in Illinois, went to high school in Texas, and came to California in the 60s. Went to UC Santa Barbara. And then I went to graduate school at UCLA and left there in '87. Grad school, moved to San Francisco and got involved in forest conservation for the Wilderness Society, and then was appointed by Gray Davis to be the Deputy Director for External Affairs at the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. And from that position I went...
And wait, to go back, what was your undergraduate and your master's in?
So my undergraduate was in cultural anthropology, and I was a musician in my first career.
Wow.
And I played music professionally in Los Angeles for 15 years, and then went to graduate school in 1985 at UCLA.
That's an interesting, really, I wouldn't have expected that. That's an interesting background.
Yeah, so I made that change and went to grad school and majored in, got a master's degree in urban planning with an emphasis in environmental policy. And I moved, as I said, to San Francisco in 1987, and then worked at the Wilderness Society for 10 years, and then went to work for Gray Davis when he was the governor.
Which is amazing. That's an amazing history to have for what you're doing.
And that's when I started to work on the role of nature as a climate solution in 2000 with Gray Davis. 2004, I went to the Nature Conservancy. I've been there ever since.
Wow, so it's been a long time. So 15? No.
I've been working on climate for 17 years.
17
right.
years,
yes,
okay.
on climate policy.
Wow. And it's such an amazing thing that you're doing. And you guys have so much that you do. Let's pull up the first slide to look at what you guys do before we get into the climate. So this is a little bit of the history, and I love this photo. This was on your website, so I snagged it. 1915 was the first year that the kind of idea came about, and we'll go to the next slide. And then if you look at the history on the next slide, your website actually talks about all the way till now, and I didn't list everything because there was so much history there, but these were some of the things I thought was really interesting, and we just kind of plucked that out. This is actually a picture of my grandmother in Colorado hiking. It looks like she's wearing a suit. So back in the 40s, that's what they wore. They didn't have hiking clothes. They just wore the natural, the things that they wore. We can go to the next slide too really quick. And then this is what you guys work on as a total: land, climate, water, ocean, city. And put a little sample of some things in California. There's Hawaii, ocean in Hawaii that's really beautiful. One beach there. Another beach we went to, there was garbage on the beach coming up from the ocean. So let's pull that down. So the work you guys are doing is so important.
Well, we are the world's largest conservation organization. We have operations in all 50 United States. We're operating in 70 countries. We have 4,000 staff, and we have over 1 million members.
Wow.
And the priorities you put up, those are our current priorities. And I've been very fortunate to be able to focus on climate change, which is often unusual in the environmental field, to have really the support to really drill down deep into one area.
So one of the things that's in your history is land purchases, and it talks about Costa Rica and something like 230,000 acres that was purchased. And originally it was purchased from military to preserve the area, and it's just, the history is just so deep, and I think that was 60s maybe, if my memory is correct, but people can go to your history on the site to look at that. And again, what you're doing is just so amazing, and it's so huge, 1 million people. I mean, do you remember the year they started taking subscriptions? Was it
No,
80s?
I don't. It's been a long time.
I think it was 50s, 60s, maybe 80s. We'll have to go back and look at the website, but it's also on there. People can go check that out. So tell us about the climate portion and what you're doing. Dig into that a little.
So our board of directors, our national board of directors, has determined that climate change is the single largest threat to our mission. Our mission is to protect the land and waters on which all life depends. And the changes that are happening now and will happen in the climate threaten our ability to succeed in that mission. And so climate change is one of the 5 priorities that you talked about. And so we're looking at climate change, I like to think of it at 2 levels. One is we're addressing the problem. We're tackling it head on. We're looking at reducing emissions and helping to transform the energy sector, and we're looking at helping communities and people prepare for the impacts. And then if we could have the next slide.
Okay, yeah, let's pull up the next slide. So we've got a bunch of slides now that are part of your presentation. So
the next one.
Okay, so this is the climate solution. Pull the next one up.
We're looking at nature, natural climate solutions as well. So there's 2 levels. One is climate at large, and then we also have a focus on natural climate solutions. And this is using the power of nature to address climate change, which is what gives us a very unique role. And so we can reduce and avoid emissions by conserving forests, for example, or natural lands. We can also remove carbon from the atmosphere and restore it back into the earth where it came from through carbon sequestration. So the land sector is the only sector in climate that actually can remove carbon and put it back in the earth. And then we're also working to enhance the resilience and reduce climate magnified risk. So it's a triple win, and at the same time we can do all that with nature, we produce a whole suite of other public benefits like clean water, food security, biodiversity, recreation, and so forth. So nature is indeed a very powerful tool to address climate change, and that's really what I've been focusing on.
And I think biodiversity, you mentioned that, is such an important thing that people don't realize how important that is. The potato famine, we here in America only get a limited amount of potatoes, but there's thousands of varieties of them, just like tomatoes and other things.
And apples too.
Right, and avocados. There's like 6,000 varieties and we only get a handful of them here. So making sure that there's biodiversity going on that helps nature. Let's pull up the next slide here. And I know we have 6 in a row.
Well, you wanted...
So this here, tell us about this one.
Well, so what California has been doing, and what I've been doing with California, initially with Gray Davis in 2000, California has worked to develop a comprehensive climate change program. That's passed, was eventually grounded in law in 2006, the Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006. And the California's program is working. That's the bottom line. It is actually working. California is regulating climate emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and growing the economy. And so if we could have that slide back up.
Okay, let's pull that one back up.
With the graph, you can see on this graph, that the green line on the top is going up, and that is the gross domestic product per capita. It's gone up 3.5% since the law started being implemented in 2013. And the bottom line, the blue line, is going down to the emissions. So the emissions are going down, the economy is going up. And this dispels this myth that, in fact, that you cannot regulate climate change without having negative economic effects. In fact, it's just the opposite. That the regulating climate has been good for California's economy. So when I started,
now is that due to the carbon offsetting?
No. This is the offsetting is just a small piece of the program. So when I started in 2000 working on climate change for Gray Davis, California, had it been a separate country, would have been the 9th largest economy and the 12th largest emitter of greenhouse gases. Well, today, it's the 6th largest economy, and it would be the 18th largest emitter of greenhouse gases. So in my tenure, I've seen the myth dispelled. The economy is growing, climate change is being addressed. The state has added 500,000 clean energy jobs. That's 10 times more jobs in clean energy in California alone that are in the entire mining industry, coal mining industry in the United States. So this program is working. It's comprehensive. It addresses 85% of the emissions of the economy, unlike the European system, which only looks at about 40% of the emissions. And California's climate change program is the only one in the world that has a robust role for forests as well, which is something that I and the Nature Conservancy and my colleagues have been instrumental in integrating into that program. So
Semperveren's Fund, do you work with them, which helps preserve?
They buy land and we help them. We've helped them in the past and worked with them.
Which is small. It's a small part of.
Well, they're a land trust, and that's how we began. As our history, we're a land trust. But we now have a whole public policy program, which is what I do. I do climate change policy. My focus is in California, helping get that law designed and passed, and the offset program for forest carbon offsets, which is also working really well. The forest carbon offsets, 6 million metric tons were accepted for compliance in the first period of California's climate law.
Incredible.
Incredible, the first in the world. So we're showing that you can create financial incentives for sustainable forestry that produce benefits to the climate as well.
So let's pull up the next slide and talk about the next one.
Well, this is the growth of renewable energy in California. So we are working hard to do this. One of the things we did in the California desert is we did a study that showed where mapping, based on maps, where solar energy could go in the desert in places that would be least controversial and would protect the most high-value conservation lands. And that has helped facilitate the growth of the renewable energy. If we could have that graph back there.
With that, actually, we'll just put that back on the website, and we're going to go to the next slide because
Okay.
we're going to move on. It's a little hard to read, so we'll make sure we put that up on the website.
The point with that slide is that we've seen 110% growth in the amount of kilowatts generated by renewable energy in the last 10 years.
Which is amazing. The
110%, more than
wind
double.
energy,
Wind
solar.
and solar, mainly wind and solar, yeah.
And then this one here.
So, you know, you were interested, we talked a little bit at the start about my work at the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Germany. I just came back about a week ago. It was the first two weeks in November. It was very long, very grueling. People think it's somewhat glamorous. It's not. I worked 11 consecutive 16-hour days.
Oh, the slide's down. I was going to say, tell us about it was the natural gas slide, right?
The natural climate solution. So one of the things we did at the conference is we released a report that showed that 37% of the emissions reductions necessary to keep warming below 2 degrees centigrade, which is the goal of the UN Climate Accord, 37% of those emissions could be generated by changes in how we manage our land. So while it's important that we continue to transform the energy sector and the transportation sector, the land sector is the stepchild, is the forgotten orphan in this. And that is something that was really, we were very successful at showcasing in Germany at the UN Climate Conference.
How many people attended that?
So there were 23,000 people who had registered for that conference. Wow. It's a huge 5-ring circus. And the other major thing that I did with other partners is we created the We Are Still In coalition. This was formed immediately in response to the announcement from the Trump administration that they were intending to withdraw the United States from the International Climate Agreement. So we had
which we not signed, and then now
no, we signed it.
Now withdrawing.
No, we signed it. Obama signed it, yes.
Okay, and then
it's an accord, not a treaty.
Okay.
But it's a 3-year process to withdraw. But mayors and state and governors got together and created the U.S. Climate Alliance, and then a bunch of us created We Are Still In Coalition, and with funding from Mayor Blumberg and others, we created the U.S. Climate Action Center, which was a separate venue where we had events all for 2 weeks that showcased the power of states and cities to work around Trump and to address climate change and meet the United States commitment to the Paris Accord. So we are still in. We're here. We could do it.
Was each state represented at that?
No. So the governors that showed up were Governor Brown from Oregon, Governor Brown from California, Governor Brown from Oregon, Governor Inslee from Washington State, and Governor McCall from Virginia. And then there were environmental and climate change state representative, state agency people from Maryland, Minnesota, Hawaii, Massachusetts, New York, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, at least, maybe more. And then Ottawa and Ontario, which are
thank you for being there and for doing that. It's amazing. And I think let's pull up a couple more slides too. We've got about 12 minutes left. What is this slide telling us?
Well,
here?
you asked me about what was our biggest challenge, of my challenge. And so while I was working on the forest carbon offsets, and I was working on reducing emissions, and I was promoting forests and nature, we couldn't get anybody interested in climate adaptation and climate resilience. And I was trying legislation. I failed miserably the first couple of years. I could barely get another environmental group to sign a letter. And so this was really hard for me to get the state to focus on what was happening internationally around climate adaptation. So what I showed there were the risks that we face in California.
The fires,
fire,
the flooding.
drought, sea level rise, and flooding. All of those risks, we're facing those today, and they all are being amplified by climate change.
The horrible fire that just happened up in Napa.
The horrible fire, unprecedented
the flooding
winds.
here in San Jose a year ago, which part of it was inappropriate planning for it, but yeah.
Yes, the scientists tell us that we're going to see more frequent extreme weather events. They're going to be more severe, and that's what's already happening. So
I actually live downtown San Jose, and we live in a house that was built in 1939. My grandfather had it built. Before he passed, before my uncle passed, is this ever going to flood here? Oh, no, it's not going to be a problem. Coyote Creek flooded last year. We were one of the lucky ones, and it got 1.5 feet before cresting in our house. But the rest of the neighborhood completely flooded. And 100-year floodplain, right, which now they're saying maybe every 25 years it'll flood like that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
What we thought was 100-year happens now all the time. Yeah. And that's what happened with this issue. Eventually, there were so many events that people understood that, climate change is not in the future, it's actually happening now, and it's threatening my lifestyle. And then I got the governor's team interested, and the legislature interested, and the other environmental groups interested, and now we've got a lot going on.
Let's pull up another slide, and we'll make sure we get through all the slides. Tell us about this.
Well, this is natural climate solutions to reduce climate risk. And this is the picture of the Yolo bypass, which people drive over on Highway 80 when they go to Sacramento.
Oh, okay.
And it shows that you can use nature to reduce the risk, in this case, of flooding to Sacramento. And at the same time, we have shown through this project and many others that using nature, natural climate solutions, are proven. They actually work. They're cost effective. They're flexible. They reduce greenhouse gas emissions because you don't pour concrete. Instead of a dike or a levee, you use a natural wetland. And so this is now been folded into California law and in California policy as well. So it's been a very encouraging sign, very fulfilling
the climate
for me.
action. Yeah,
that
California,
we're using, that the California, the leaders recognize the power of nature to address climate change.
Let's pull up another one. I'm not sure which slide this is we're at now. I think this should be 8 or 9. Oh, it's the same one. Go to the next one.
Handsome guy, yeah.
Oh, and this is the last one. This is you in Germany. Yes?
Yeah, so this is me in Germany. I give a lot of talks. I produced a lot of events. I threw a lunch for California Assembly members and state senators. I was interviewed on German TV. I spoke at a press conference. And so it was a very, very busy time. And we were sharing the message that we are still in, that cities and states and NGOs are getting the job done. Regardless of what happens or doesn't happen in Washington, D.C., we are still in, we're here. And that's really the message to all of us here, is that, keep it up. We need to double our efforts. We need to do more. We need to do more quickly, but we're not going to stop. We don't care what happens over there. We're going to work around the federal government and take our message globally.
So I would love to be at the UN someday at this conference, and I'm hoping that in the next 6 months or a year, things will actually change. There's been talk about impeachment. We'll see what happens because we have a nutty president, right? And it's obvious that climate is an issue. I mean, to most people, right? So it was funny. I was at a talk last night, and they were talking about wage differences, and women versus men, and it's obvious that there's wage differences. But so if you think that that's not obvious, then you must not think that climate's not obvious, and the two are obvious that there's that there.
Well, while I was in Germany, the country of Syria signed the Paris Climate Accord. That left the United States and Sudan as the only countries of the world that are not on board with this program. And
there's apparently also an international water protection thing that just started too, and the U.S. is the only nation that hasn't signed that as well, which protects our rights and the environment in the ocean off of our
great. Well, that's wonderful.
Which is kind of interesting, but we haven't signed it. So the environment thing, hopefully, we'll have some people in place that'll help the climate and that. What's been the biggest issue for you and challenge, and how have you overcome it? And then the next question I want to make sure we get to: what's the best accolade for you?
Well, the challenge was the adaptation policy and getting that moving, and that took 3 years. And what I did, I would say it was persistence, patience, and persuasion. And eventually the Earth caught up with what I was trying to do and showed people that these events were happening. And
you're probably very good at persuasion with what you've been doing for so long, right? So yeah,
that's what they pay me to do. And as I said at the beginning, I have the good fortune to be able to focus on one particular issue, climate change. And I think that the high point of my career really was in the United Nations conference in Paris. Not only was the Paris Accord an historic event, and at that time there were 192 of the 100.
Was it 2 years ago or 4 years ago?
It was 2 years ago.
2 years,
there was, after Paris was Marrakesh, and now Bonn. But that was also the year that the adaptation legislation was passed, and the governor had issued an executive order on adaptation much of which I wrote for him, and that happened. And then the forest carbon offsets that I started working on in 2000 actually came full circle in 2015, and they were accepted for compliance in California's climate change program. So all those events were happening, all those things, personal and global triumphs that happened, and to me that was really the pinnacle of my professional career in Paris. And while I thought the work that I did in Bonn just 2 weeks ago was very successful and very important, and I got a lot of energy and a lot of positive feedback, and we helped create this awareness of the importance of state level action, which is critical, especially today. That was good too, but the Paris experience was the high point for me.
Is there any future plans you want to share with what you guys are doing?
Yes, there's two things I want to emphasize. First of all, we're taking the notion of the role of the land sector in climate change. We released a report in Bonn 2 weeks ago. We followed it last week with a new report in California, and we have another report this week from our soil scientists about the role of the land sector to generate climate benefits. So now we're working with the state of California to elevate the role of the land sector in the California's climate law, and we expect an announcement on December 14th where there will be a greenhouse gas reduction target from the land base. The other thing I want to highlight is Governor Brown has announced that he will convene a climate summit in San Francisco, international summit, on September 12th. In San Francisco, first time any state.
2018?
2018 in September. And so we are now working on that. It's only 9.5 months away.
Right.
And the clock is going to go by quickly. And that's going to happen in September before the next UN climate meeting that will happen in a year from now.
And I guess it's always November? I always thought it was December when
it has fluctuated
varies.
Before Thanksgiving and after Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Now it's going back after Thanksgiving.
What inspires you still to do what you do?
Well, I think what inspires me is my love for nature and the natural world, and I think that I share that love with many, 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 many people in our society of all creeds and religions and income groups. It's really the majesty and the power of nature that inspires me, and the threat that it's really under, that we all, and the dependency that we all depend on. You mentioned biodiversity earlier. We're part of a system that includes plants and animals and fungus and all these other things, and atmosphere and water, and I want to do what I can to leave a legacy for future generations, to leave a world that in some way resembles that with which we've grown up with.
I skipped over a question about, is there something that we can help you with? Is there something that you guys need locally, nationally?
Well, I think people can visit our website, nature.org. They can join our organization. We always like to have more members.
Do you take volunteers?
We have a program for youth.
Okay.
You know, in the cities, but we don't really have a lot of activities, you know, weekend activities like some clubs.
Well, maybe this climate thing that's going to happen next year, that
People
Governor
could
Brown,
show up.
they
But
may need
I
help
think
with that.
what people could do is really, people should, I would say, vote for elected officials that support climate action, get involved politically and volunteer where they can. I would say, you know, lifestyle changes are important. I'd say give up some long-distance air travel. To me, the sign of the frequent flyer with a gold card is a bad thing. You know, that shows that you're not living a sustainable life. You should be in the back of the plane. That's a good thing, you know, as far as I'm concerned. Don't go to, you know, New York for the play if you can avoid it. You know, the other thing that's important is to support education of women globally. That's one of the most important things, is to educate women and provide them with a birth control. And that's really a global solution that people can get involved into.
Is there, well, so we kind of talked about membership, and we only have a couple minutes left. So is there any last thoughts you want to leave the audience with? Anything, one takeaway that you want to leave with them?
Well, I would say that the coming out of the meeting in Germany, that the energy that was in the We Are Still In coalition, in this center that we helped create, the U.S. Climate Action Center, because the U.S. walked away from their center. The people are understanding now that the world understands that there are actors in the United States picking up the mantle, that we can work around the Trump administration and we can get the job done. So we need to have hope. We need to double our efforts. I'm optimistic still, you know, so I would urge people to do what they can in any way to help make this happen and leave the planet in some livable form.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for coming. I think that we're going to have you back, because we didn't get to all the questions, but it was great having you on, and you know, thank you. And certainly, if you need help in September, let me know, give me some information. I'll put it out there, and, you know, to our email list and our folks on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for what you're doing here too, because this is an important part of the effort, is to communicate the actions that we're all doing and that people can take. And so thank you for hosting the show and producing it.
Thank you. To the audience, thank you for watching us. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, www.svtags.org. Come to one of our meetups, which is one of the ways that we can sponsor and fund this program. And you know, thank you for joining us. Make it a great Tags Week by conserving, reusing, and rethinking the way you choose to live here in Silicon Valley and beyond. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.